Greetings and welcome. This is the ThaBadbrey Herbalist, ancient astrologer of the ThaBadbrey Herbal.co.uk. And today I'm going to be speaking to you about how ancient Horary astrology can be used for gambling purposes. This is the ThaBadbrey Herbalist, ancient astrologer of the ThaBadbrey Herbal.co.uk. So, how can ancient astrology be used and utilized for gambling purposes? So, let's look at this. Now, on Saturday, the 3rd of June, 2017, a regular client came to me for an astrological reading. This regular client, who's also a good friend of mine, during the reading, he said to me, "Can I ask you a question? Can I ask you to cast a horary chart to find out whether or not Juventus will win or if Real Madrid will win?" He said, "Is it okay for him to ask me that?" And I said, "Yeah, that's fine. I can draw up a horary chart and we can easily ascertain which team will win." Now, using horary astrology for gambling purposes and games of chance is very simple if you know the rules of ancient astrology. So, at the time my client asked me the question, I generated a horary chart. All right. As you can see here, this is the horary chart for Saturday, the 3rd of June, 2017. Saturday, the day of Saturn. Okay, at 4:24 p.m. And this is the chart that was generated. Now, before I analyze the chart, my client said to me, he said that he reckons that Juventus will win and that he had already made a bet that Juventus will win. All right. Now, please bear in mind that me, the ThaBadbrey Herbalist, ancient astrologer, I know nothing about football. I don't follow football. I don't care about it. I don't care who wins. I don't care who loses. I have no interest. I have no interest in watching football. I didn't even know that the team was called Real Madrid. I thought it was Royal Madrid until my client came to me on Saturday and said Real instead of Royal. That shows how much of an interest I have in football. So, anyway, this is the chart that was generated, yeah, as a result. Now, I'm going to show you exactly how I came to the conclusion who would actually win, all right? So, first of all, my client was saying that he thinks that Juventus will actually win, all right? So I cast the chart and I said, "Which team do you want to win?" And he said, "Juventus." So I said, "Okay, now, if you are looking at some type of gambling process and you want to apply the rules of horary astrology, what you do is you cast a horary chart for the time the question is asked or at the time that the heavens move you to ask the question, and then you cast a chart. And then after the chart is actually cast, the team who is playing who you want to win, for example, if you want Juventus to win, in this chart, the first house and the sign on the cusp of the first house will represent Juventus. So I said to my client, since you want Juventus to win, we need to take the first house and the sign on the cusp of the first house as well as its ruler to represent Juventus. And then we look at the condition of Juventus, i.e. the ruler of the first house, and that tells us how well Juventus will actually win, or how well Juventus will actually play, rather. All right. So then we look over here in the horary chart. As we can see, it's 23 degrees Libra ascending. All right. Now Libra is actually ascending here, and this is the first house. This proportion here is the first house. The first house cusp is on Libra. Libra is ruled by Venus. Therefore, Venus represents Juventus. Now, what we can see here, the first thing that we actually look at is the fact that Venus is right in her detriment, okay? Because Venus rules Libra. And in this chart, Venus is in Aries. And when a planet is found in a sign that is opposite to the sign it actually rules, that means the planet is in detriment and it has zero power to act. It can't do anything, all right? And as we can see, as we established earlier, Venus represents Juventus, as she is the ruler of the first house and the sign on the cusp of the first house, which represents Juventus. So I'm looking at this. I get the first testimony that Juventus are in a very bad position, all right? Because Venus represents Juventus and she's in her detriment. And she is in Aries in her detriment. So therefore, she has very little power to act as a result of it. The other thing that I looked at, I could see that in the 12th house, yes, this is Juventus's 12th house of hidden matters, things that they want to hold on to, things that they want to keep hidden from other people, i.e. they want to keep it hidden from the other team, all right? So I looked at it and it was like, I can see that Jupiter is right in Libra, all right? Now, Jupiter represents gifts, okay? Things that are given to you, all right? So straight away, I said to my client, it looks like your team, Juventus, it looks like they have a reputation to uphold and they have a good track record and they want to hold on to it. And they have an emotional need to want to hold on to this track record. And the reason I say that is because Jupiter is actually here, which is either the title that Juventus hold, the track record that they actually have, or the cup that they actually have won in the past. And then you got the moon here, which represents their emotion, which is conjunct Jupiter, which is the title and reputation they have. And it's in the 12th house. So therefore, they have a reputation to uphold and they have an emotional need to want to hold on to this reputation and not lose. All right. So that means that Juventus have a stronger reputation than Real Madrid, based upon what I can see in the chart here. Now, please bear in mind, I know nothing about football. I'm getting to these answers as a result of looking at the ancient astrological symbolism that is prevalent within the Horary chart generated on Saturday, the 3rd of June, 2017. So back to what I was saying. Now, let's go back to where Venus is, which represents Juventus. The other thing that's happening is that Venus is right in the 7th house. Now, the 7th house in this chart, in gambling charts, if it's two games, well, one game and two teams playing against each other, the first house represents the first team or the team that is your favorite or the home team, and the 7th house represents the opponent. Now, in this case, this 7th house here represents Real Madrid. And the fact that Venus, which represents Juventus, is in the 7th house, and the 7th house represents Real Madrid, that means Real Madrid have complete control and dominance over Juventus, okay? Because Venus is Juventus and it's right in the 7th house, which represents the first house of the other team. And through an ancient technique called chart turning, what we do now, we relabel the houses. If this over here is the first house of Juventus, and this is the second house of Juventus, and this is the third house of Juventus, then if we go over here and we say the 7th house represents Real Madrid, then this 7th house becomes the first house of Real Madrid, okay? So this is Real Madrid's first house, this is Real Madrid's second house, and this is Real Madrid's third house. So the fact that Venus, which represents Juventus, is inside Real Madrid's first house means that Real Madrid has complete control and dominance over Juventus. And add to that, Juventus is also in detriment because Venus represents Juventus and she's in her detriment as a result of it. All right. Now, the next thing I look at is the third house. This is Juventus's third house. In this type of chart, the third house represents how well the team will communicate with each other and how well they will cooperate when they are actually playing the game itself, all right? Now, as you can see, this third house here represents the team and the teamwork of Juventus. Now, the cusp of the third house is on Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. And as I established before, Jupiter represents their reputation, the title they hold, or the cup that they probably won in the past, okay? So therefore, the team represented by the third house is very much orientated and geared towards trying to uphold and keep the cup or the title or the good reputation in their possession, all right? And if you use the ancient technique of chart turning, this third house is relabeled to the first house of the team. And then if we count backwards from this first house, 12, 11, 10. So this is the team's first house. This is the team's 12th house. And this is the team's 11th house. And this is the team's 10th house. And the 10th house represents career. So the team has made a career out of having to defend the reputation and the title that they currently hold. So that's all they are concentrating on. And the fact that the moon is over here also means they have an emotional attachment to the title that they had in the past. All right. Now, that's all well and good. And Jupiter's actually there. And Jupiter is the greater benefic. However, in this situation now, right in the third house, which represents the team and the teamwork that they would need to actually win against Real Madrid, yeah, you have Saturn, which is the greater malefic. All right. And because Saturn is right here, Saturn makes the team slow, sluggish. It makes them complain, and it also makes them tired and have arguments and conflict within the team and amongst each other whilst they're playing. So as soon as I looked at this, I said to my client, it's very likely that Juventus, your team, who you want to win, are going to be having communication problems with each other. They're going to be shouting at each other, and they're going to be arguing, and as a result, the team won't play very well. And the other thing which confirms that to me is the fact that Saturn is making a trine to Venus in Aries. All right. Now, as we established, Venus represents Juventus, okay, and she's in her detriment, and she's right in the first house of the opponents, okay. And then we have Saturn, who is in the third house, which represents how well the team will communicate. Now, because Saturn is making a trine to Venus, and Venus is in Aries, and Aries is the fall of Saturn, what we have here with this trine in between Saturn and Venus, Venus receives Saturn into fall. So not only is Saturn inhibiting the team and making them slow and sluggish and have communication problems between them, he is also afflicting Venus as a result of Venus, which represents Juventus, receiving him into fall, i.e. causing the team to fall short in terms of their performance when they're trying to go against Real Madrid, okay? So the team is not playing well. They're fumbling all over the place. They're not they're not communicating with each other effectively. And then as a result, the whole team is suffering, represented by Venus in her detriment in Aries, receiving Saturn, which is the team's poor communication, receiving Saturn into fall, all right? So straight away I said, the team's not going to play well. They're going to be fumbling all over the place. And also due to the fact that Venus, which represents Juventus, is also conjunct Uranus, and Uranus is known to represent or implicate spontaneous combustion, which is anger, which will correspond with the team being frustrated with each other and not communicating effectively. But Uranus also corresponds with combustion in terms of being tired and being burnt out and needing rest. So I said to my client, the team's not going to be playing very well. They're very burnt out and they need rest. Perhaps if the game was to take place at a later date, they would win. But due to the fact that they're burnt out, the team is very tired and they need sleep. And as a result, they are very grumpy. It looks like they will be in a bad mood and they won't be communicating effectively. And as a result, it looks like Real Madrid will dominate them. All right. Now, the other thing that's going on here, if we go back to the 7th house, which represents the first house of Real Madrid, the cusp of the 7th house is on Aries, and Aries is ruled by Mars. So where is Mars in the chart? Mars in the chart is over here. So Mars over here represents Real Madrid. Now, as we can see, Mars is right inside the 3rd house of Real Madrid. This is Real Madrid's 1st house, this is Real Madrid's 2nd house, and this is Real Madrid's 3rd house. It's right in the 3rd house of Real Madrid. And as I said earlier, the 3rd house represents how well the team will actually play. Now, when Mars is over here, Mars is right in Gemini, and Gemini represents thinking very quickly on your feet and being able to problem solve. If somebody has Mars in Gemini in their natal chart, it's very likely that they're very good at calculating, they're very good at mathematics, they're very good at algebra, and they make excellent computer programmers. And as you can see here, Mars is right here in Gemini inside the 3rd house of Real Madrid, which points to the fact that they should be able to perform very well when they are on the football pitch as a result of the team communicating with each other and cooperating very effectively as a result of this placement of Mars in Real Madrid's third house in Gemini. Now, as you can see, Mars is just about to change over to Cancer, which is a sign of his fall. If Mars was in Cancer, then I would say, okay, then Real Madrid they aren't in such a good position to actually win. But due to the fact that Mars is in Gemini, that means they have a very good chance of winning. Although Mars doesn't have any dignities in Gemini, it doesn't look like he doesn't have any abilities in Gemini. He's actually cool in Gemini because Mars represents drive, determination, thinking quickly, and your blood pumping and getting things done, and the warrior spirit. And Gemini represents thinking quickly, all right? So it's a good combination to have Mars in Gemini. The other thing that's taking place is the fact that there is a sextile that Mars is casting towards Venus, and Venus represents Juventus. So if Mars represents Real Madrid and he's in a very good position, and Venus represents Juventus and she is not only in the first house of Real Madrid and being dominated by them completely, and also being in her detriment, and also receiving Saturn, poor teamwork, into fall, and also being burnt out as a result of being conjunct Uranus as well. Not only is that the fact, she is also receiving Mars into rulership because Mars rules Aries and Venus is in Aries, okay? So, through this sextile between Venus and Mars, Venus receives Mars into rulership. So Mars is dominating her and she can't do anything where she is. So, what's happened, as we can see here, Saturn, in ancient astrology, Saturn and Mars are known as the malefics. Saturn is the greater malefic and Mars is the lesser malefic. And when both of these planets work in conjunction with each other or gang up on another planet, it causes that planet a lot of harm. And as we can see here, Saturn is making a trine to Venus and she's receiving him into fall. And Mars is making a sextile to Venus and she's receiving him into rulership. So what's happening here is Mrs. Venus is getting gangbanged by Mars and Saturn. So Juventus, which is represented by Venus, is in a very bad position. Their team's not playing well and they're being dominated by the strategic nature, the superior strategic nature of Real Madrid, okay? So from there, I said to my client, it's very likely that the team that you think is going to win, Juventus, are going to perform badly and they may be completely dominated by Real Madrid. Now, after looking at that, I decided to analyze whether or not Real Madrid have a chance of losing, all right? And by doing that, I could establish and come to a conclusion definitively who would be more likely to win, all right? So, I decided to look ahead and see which planet would change signs first, because Mars, which represents Real Madrid, was just about to move out of Gemini and go into the sign of his fall, all right? And Venus, which represents Juventus, was just about to move out of Aries, which is a detriment, and move into Taurus, which is a sign of her rulership. So whichever planet would change signs first would determine which team would actually win. Now, if Venus, which represents Juventus, was to move into Taurus before Mars moved into Cancer, that would denote that Juventus have a good chance of winning. And if Mars moved into Cancer before Venus moved into Taurus, that would mean that Real Madrid, which is represented by Mars, would have a better chance of winning. Now, the reason I say that is because although when Mars is in Cancer, he's in the sign of his fall, and Mars represents Real Madrid, although Mars is in his fall when he's in Cancer, the reason I would say that Real Madrid, which is represented by Mars, would have a better chance of winning if it moves into Cancer before Venus, Juventus, moves into Taurus, is because, as I said before, the title or the cup or the reputation that Juventus holds is represented by Jupiter and is also represented by Mars, their emotion, yeah? The emotional attachment to this title, this cup, yeah? Now, as you can see here, there is a square between Mars and Jupiter, and the moon, all right? So Jupiter and the moon, which represents the title that everybody's trying to get hold of, is making a square to Mars, which represents Real Madrid. Now, the thing about this, when you use the astrological dignities of ancient astrology, it tells you almost everything that you need to know about how the situation is actually playing out. Because as we can see here, this represents Real Madrid, and they are trying their hardest to get hold of this cup, which is represented by Jupiter. This title, they're trying their hardest to get hold of it. However, what's happening is this sign here, Libra, which represents Juventus, has Jupiter in it, which represents the cup. However, Libra is the detriment of Mars. So therefore, whenever Real Madrid, which is represented by Mars, tries to move over and get their hands onto the cup, which is represented by Jupiter, they end up in their detriment and they cannot get hold of it as a result of Libra being the detriment of Mars. All right. And similarly, whenever they try to get hold of Jupiter, which represents the title or the cup, it doesn't work. Again, because there's another testimony which shows Jupiter, when it is placed in Gemini, is also in its detriment. So there we have between Mars and Jupiter a detrimental reception. Both of these planets don't want to be where each other are currently located. Therefore, the Real Madrid obtaining the cup from Juventus does not happen until Mars changes signs, all right? Because when Mars changes signs and goes into Cancer, although Mars is in his fall when he's in Cancer, Cancer represents, well, Cancer is the exaltation of Jupiter, which represents the cup. So as soon as Mars goes into Cancer, which is like, I think it was a few days after the match itself, then it's able to receive Jupiter, the cup, into exaltation. And not only that, it also receives the moon into rulership, because the moon rules Cancer. So then I looked at my ephemeris to look at the planetary positions, and I found that Mars moved into Cancer on, I think it was the 5th. Let me see. Yep. Mars moved into Cancer on the 5th of June. And then Venus moves into Taurus on the 7th of June, which concluded to me definitively that due to the fact that Mars, which represents Real Madrid, moves into Cancer and receives the moon into rulership and Jupiter into exaltation, and Mars moves into Cancer before Venus, which represents Juventus, moves into Taurus, that told me that Real Madrid would definitely win and obtain everything that they need to obtain from Juventus, and that Juventus will definitely lose straight away. So then my client said, this is what happened. Straight after I gave that judgment, my client said, all right then, you know what? I'm going to change my bet, and I'm going to bet 100% on Real Madrid to win based upon what you're saying. And he asked me if I'm sure about it. I said, yes, it looks like completely that this is likely to take place and transpire and cause Real Madrid to win and dominate Juventus. Now, due to the fact, and also said to him, due to the fact that both planets which represent both teams are just about to change signs, it means the match will be very, very close. And I said to him, don't be surprised if it goes to penalties. And then after penalties, don't be surprised if Real Madrid win 4-1. That's exactly what I said. All right. So, anyway, after that, I closed the laptop and we continued with the reading. I continued giving him his usual reading as normal. And then afterwards, I finished my day, went to sleep, woke up, and I thought to myself, because I don't really care about football. I don't watch it. I don't care about the results. I don't care who wins. I don't really care. But I thought to myself, when I woke up in the morning, the next morning, I woke up and I thought, let me check the football results just to see who actually won. All right. Let me check. So I went onto my smartphone, my Android, and I typed in Juventus. I didn't even type in Juventus. I didn't even get to type in the whole word. All I typed was Juv. And then straight away Google started throwing up all of these all of these results saying Real Madrid 4, Juventus 1. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, the astrology is so powerful. It completely showed exactly what will actually take place and how it will take place. And exactly what was shown in the astrological horary chart is exactly how it actually played out. All right. So I text my client and said, have you seen the results? And he said, yes, you are right. Real Madrid won. This is crazy. So there you have it. That is how ancient horary astrology can be used for gambling purposes. And if you know what you're doing, you can be highly successful in your endeavor. All right. This is the ThaBadbrey Herbalist Assar, ancient astrologer of the ThaBadbreyHerbal.co.uk. Stay tuned. I will be back. Dendra.